Get started. Hey, everybody. Okay, we are doing our first debate of the summer 2024. The topic for today's debate is AI art generation. The scenario is that a media production company has developed the opening scene of a series completely with AI. And some artists who work for the company are concerned that this is going to threaten their jobs. They are going to protest and sue the company, and they are particularly worried that the art that they have produced is being used to train these models. On the flip side, the corporate side of the media production company argues that these AI models are going to help the company be more efficient, create cooler stuff, etc., etc. So we have two teams. We have an arts-based team and a corporate-based team. The arts team has a photographer and illustrator, a voice actor, and a writer-journalist. And the corporate team has a CEO, a social media influencer, and a pro generative AI news company member. So let's get started. Team A, which is the arts team, I believe you are opening us up.
Hello everyone, so my name is Neyman Fourali, and today I'd like to introduce myself to you not only as a photographer and illustrator, but also as a representative of a large number of us artists whose voices resonate with concern about the rapid rise of AI in the creative sphere. Art is more than just creating images, sounds, or words. It is a deep expression of human emotion, experience, and culture. As Stephen Hawking said, the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. While this may sound extreme, it highlights the potential dangers of AI encroaching into areas that are fundamentally human, like creativity. When we produce art, we transmit a part of our identity, our unique perspectives, and our hard-earned skills. The integration of artificial intelligence into this sacred space raises significant ethical concerns that we cannot ignore. One of the main concerns that we face is the morality of using AI to replicate and potentially replace our creativity. This is not simply a technical issue, but a profoundly moral one. When AI is used to imitate our work without our consent or fair compensation, it removes the value of originality, reducing art to mere data points rather than recognizing it as a meaningful human expression. This is not an abstract fear. Many of us, like Kelly McKernan, have seen our distinctive style reproduced by AI without permission, threatening our ability to earn a living. Kelly, along with other artists, is now fighting back by taking legal action against the AI companies that have used their work without their consent. This legal battle highlights the very real and personal impact that AI can have on our livelihood and the integrity of our work. Moreover, the impact of us as artists is profound if AI continues to invade our creative spaces. It could discourage future generations from pursuing art. Why would someone invest years in developing their art when a machine can replicate and steal their efforts in seconds? This is not just loss of jobs, but a devaluation of our entire profession. The art world risks losing its heart, its human touch, if we let AI dominate the space where our creativity thrives. Additionally, the public's perception of art could change, leading to a dangerous devaluation of our work as something that can be easily and rapidly produced by machines rather than as a unique and precious human work. And let's not overlook the quality of AI-generated art. While it may mimic the surface of our work, it lacks the depth, intentionality, and emotional resonance that only human creativity can instill. AI-generated art often falls flat, feeling soulless and mechanical because it draws on existing work without really understanding them. It takes what already exists without adding the creative spark that transforms something existing to something genuinely new and inspired. Copyright and intellectual property rights also pose a significant problem. When AI generates artworks from our existing work, it often does so by drawing on vast databases of our creations without proper attribution or compensation. This can lead to situations where our original work are effectively plagiarized by the AI, which then produces new works that are in fact just resemble fragments of our original works. This situation not only undermines the originality and integrity of our work, but also raises legal and ethical questions about who owns the right to AI-generated artworks. Is it the artist who created the original work? the company that created the AI models, or perhaps both? From our point of view, the situation is more than unfair, it's downright professional bullying and gaslighting. Companies that use AI to generate art exploit us by taking our work, profiting from it, and leaving us nothing in return. They exploit the lack of regulations and laws regarding the use of artists' labor, raking it in large sums of money while we continue to struggle under unstable working conditions. We need transparency. How can we give consent if we don't have even basic transparency about how these models are trained and used? And yes, AI models may be cheaper than artists today, but as a new study published by Stanford University reveals, training costs for the most advanced AI systems have been rising for years due to the increasing computing power required and the large employee compensation needed. The AI race between tech companies is driving up costs, making AI less profitable than it seems today. Moreover, it's important to consider the environmental impact of AI-generated art. The computational power required to train large AI models is enormous, leading to a significant carbon footprint. For example, a study by the University of Massachusetts found that training a single AI model can emit as much carbon as 5 cars over their lifetime. This is not just an issue of artist integrity, it's also about sustainability. The resources being poured into AI art generations are contributing to environmental degradation, all while producing work that lacks the depth and creativity of human-made art.
Okay. Do we have a response from team 2?
Not so much a response, but our own opening statement.
Yep.
I do want to clarify, actually. I think, Calvin, we had this discussion during our debate prep, but we didn't really understand how the scenario was going to be laid out because it didn't make sense to have a social media influencer and like a news company involved in the opening. So we're just kind of like three people from different fields coming together just to set the scene for you all.
Gotcha. This is fine. Yep. Please go
Okay.
ahead.
Cool. So, hi everyone. As I said, we're the team defending the use of generative AI for artistic purposes, and we are a team of three coming from different fields and crafts ourselves. But we do agree that the use of generative AI would give us a lot of benefit in our work. My teammates are from two companies. One, Riley, is the CEO of a tech company, and the other, Godwin, is from a news company. And I myself am an influencer on various social media platforms. So we each came into this debate focused on one type of generative AI for our own work, actually. I'm interested in generating images to make my content a little bit more interesting and a lot easier. And my teammates were mainly interested in large language models and generating text, for example, generating code for the tech company or perhaps descriptive text for journalism. I'll also let my teammates go deeper into their own roles and their perspectives during their own arguments. But during our discussions for this debate, we realized that we could actually all benefit from the different types of generative AI. So we actually have quite a few shared reasons for wanting to use generative AI. Now, the primary reason that had us all become interested in generative AI in the first place is, of course, efficiency, right? Generating text or images for each of us means time, money, and effort saved. In my case, my social media platforms each require a few posts every single day. That means I need to be creating content from scratch all day, every day, or I risk losing my audience to the elusive algorithm. Now, this not only means spending like very unfair amount of time working so that I can make ends meet, but it also means I get less time to think about and prepare to make the content. So the quality is actually much lower than I would like. By generating images and videos for my content, I can make it much more interesting and save my energy and time for perhaps more important tasks. And we as a team think this is actually the next benefit we all noticed, how much more time we have for tasks that we are much more interested in, right? We're each able to do more quote unquote high level work, which for me is about figuring out what story I'm going to tell in my post instead of, getting the camera in the right place, figuring out the microphone setup and things like that. And this kind of grunt work, like when I'm making graphics, which is about like creating the background, choosing a font, all these things, I can't just, I can just automate those things and get it over with in less than half the time. And I think it's the same kind of benefits for my teammates who get to have things like basic code or descriptions of common events ready to go in just minutes, right? They can focus on the more interesting parts of tech development or journalism themselves. And this is actually where I have to step back from my own work and talk a little bit about my teammates, because in my case, I'm a one-person team. I don't actually make enough that I can justify hiring an artist or a writer myself, yet at least. But my teammates, they're not exactly firing their teams of artists or writers and replacing them with robots, like in the scary stories that mostly older generations tell. A journalism company is not going to be getting rid of all their writers. They're still hiring and keeping writers on their payroll. It's just that they're going to be focusing on having writers who work on the higher level skills a lot more, like writing a well thought out and researched investigative piece instead of the fluff pieces that fill newspaper pages. And similar to that, if the tech company needs a video for their marketing, they'll go to an artist that has the best concept, whether that person uses AI or not. And the truth is, a lot of artists will either use AI and get more interesting, more complex work out faster than their colleagues, or they're going to start spinning their work as something that is specifically AI free. And we actually think this is where generative AI is moving the field. The same way that you can buy a perfectly good sliced bread made in a factory for a few dollars, you'll be able to get art or a piece of writing from generative AI maybe for free, the way that we currently have it. And that doesn't mean people aren't out there making, artisan bread in fancy specialty bakeries and selling them at a premium. And it doesn't mean there's no joy in baking bread yourself at home from scratch. It takes no value away from others to have a type of product, or in this case, images and text, created by other means. And in the same way, you can still have generative AI make something that is like a factory produced loaf of bread. You can have artisans who are artists who are not using AI produce something at a premium. And then you can still make art at home for yourself, because it's really not about the output, right? It's about the process of making art itself. And I actually want to close our opening statement with this point. I think generative AI is not the reason human-made art is being devalued. Art and humanities, unfortunately, have been devalued for centuries at every level. And I come from a humanities background. I know exactly what that's like on a personal level. But I think the problem lies not with the alternatives that we have, but the systems that determine value in the first place, right? If a company you wanted to join is not hiring artists because they have generative AI, that says more about the company's values than it does about generative AI or art. It's the same awful argument that says, immigrants steal jobs from locals, when reality is that the companies prefer to hire immigrants because they can have their unethical practices allow them a lower salary for each person. So I propose that we keep the debate on topic, which really isn't about how particular companies make poor big business practices and decisions using generative AI. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker.
Hi, I'm Zarif. I'm representing the position of writers and journalists. I guess just to respond to Pinar, I hope I pronounced your name right. I agree with a lot of the stuff you said, but I have some concerns about the way it's framed. I'm here representing journalists because we see a big problem in the way that this technology is being used across the industry. And like there are some positions that you have that seem idealistic because we do not have regulations in place that can protect us from the harms that we see these technologies posing. So just to tackle two of the points you made about how it would free up your time to do like higher level skills, and the other one was cost. Nariman, in our opening statement, already talked about how the cost is going to keep going up, the cost that we see for these models right now. I believe these companies are incurring losses to capture a larger market share. We've already seen the same tactic across the tech industry from companies like Uber, where they undercut the market, and now they're just more expensive than taxis after replacing these taxis. Especially with the rising environmental costs, I see this cost going up and up. I would be very I'd be very cautious about using these technologies to replace actual workers, and that is where my main argument is. There's already also Nariman also mentioned about how we have the creatives need to be compensated for their work, and if the companies actually started doing that, to give you one example, some researchers from Columbia University estimated that if Google gave US publishers 50 cents of the value created by the news content, they'd be shelling out between 10 to 12 billion annually. Right now, New York Times, the largest news publisher, is only getting 100 million. So once you start factoring in this cost, I think the cost for using these generative models would go up exponentially. Second, when you're talking about like freeing up time to do higher skilled work, I do not think that's how companies operate. Companies operate on profit motives. They would replace the jobs that would save them money. They would replace the jobs that can be replaced. So the first line of jobs that are going to be replaced would be probably like quote unquote lower skilled work or entry-level jobs. But this is not as trivial as this seems, because this is where aspiring writers and journalists learn their trade. So without these jobs, like there is this worry that we're going to have fewer journalists coming in because you do not really need entry-level journalists anymore. And I think this is a big problem further down the line in a world where democracies around the world are facing existential threats. One of the worst manifestations of this is the emergence of fake news, where misinformation is being used as a weapon by different competing parties. And the role of journalists here is vital. So these models are fundamentally incapable of telling fact from fiction. They're prone to these hallucinations where they're making up bullshit, basically, as researchers from Glasgow put. And not even when they are being factual, these models are biased because they're trained on data that is biased. Proponents of this technology would argue that you can make them unbiased by maybe putting in more unbiased data sets, but I think that misunderstands how bias in society work. Bias exists among all of us, and the way we as a society address these issues is not by eradicating bias, but by acknowledging them and trying to come up with mechanisms that that work for us. And I think the way that these models are trained in its current iteration, they're just not suited in the same way to address them. And these will have real world consequences. And when a journalist makes a mistake, when a journalist produces something that causes some kind of harm, however we define harm, they can put out addendums, they can put out corrections. You cannot do the same with these models, especially with the way that like you have AI companies providing services to news companies, and news companies using those services. Like the blame is going to get pushed from one side to the other without it being resolved. So I believe that we need better regulation before these technologies are used, especially in a domain as sensitive as journalism. On top of that, the companies will always have their trade secrets that will prevent you from being able to audit their models properly. So to close my statement, I want to make it clear that I'm not a Luddite. I welcome technology that will empower us. I'm all for the principles that Pinar mentioned. but these models in their current iteration can cause a lot of damage if you're not very careful. ChatGPT and other LLMs are ultimately very large hammers designed to be all-purpose. When you have a hammer, everything starts to look like nails. Thank you.
Okay, who's next?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good, Riley.
Wonderful. Well, if every problem's looking like a nail, I think I need more than just a hammer, hopefully. I don't really want to have a hammer in my tool belt. So as pointed out before, right, companies are profit driven. As a tech CEO, I'm not going to lie. My name is Riley, and I'm looking out for my profit margins. And so if the point was that AI training is going to increase the cost of using it, I'm not gonna use it if human artists are cheaper. So I'm just gonna hire them if they're gonna save me costs. Currently, AI art may be cheaper, and that is the alternative, and that is what we're looking at. And as the end user, that is what we're going to use. But if the artists are going to be the cheaper alternative and have less ecological impact than the actual AI training, well, it doesn't make any sense because once again, I got to maintain my margins. And the second point I wanted to make is that if AI isn't supposed to replace the higher skill work, right? And that's not how companies operate. And that inherently in the machines that there's hallucinations and there's misinformation, there's bias, and there's trouble distinguishing between fact or fiction between various industries and the use of AI in terms of research or journalism. I think that just puts greater emphasis on the human element. And you can't replace critical thinking, and you can't replace ethical practice. And if you're a journalist worth your salt, or you're a researcher who knows how to conduct your work properly, you shouldn't be using AI so belligerently. And I think we'll see that reflected in the marketplace, where we won't necessarily prioritize or value poorly created material or poorly curated content. And so I don't think we should conflate poor business practice or poor business conduct with the potential of generative AI art. I think that's what we're seeing currently, because technology develops faster than our capacity to regulate it. So as my influencer friend pointed out, that generative AI is the next best thing since sliced bread, but we still prefer bakery products. AI artwork reminds me of sampling in the hip hop music industry, where artists would take recordings of previous songs and then reuse them in their work. And so there's a few practices that make this endeavor a bit more ethical. These artists will usually ask these older artists to use their recordings. They need to be paid and they need to be credited. Artists will only sample usually one element from a track, and they won't resample something if it's already been sampled. And I think these practices can demonstrate that there are ethical guidelines in other areas of art that we should look to encourage the ethical use of art and the ethical use of AI. And so I have two examples to demonstrate the difference between the ethical approach to generative AI. The first one is Midjourney, which is a generative AI art model, which can just be accessed through the internet. Last year, the company behind Midjourney had a spreadsheet leaked with around 16,000 names, demonstrating clear unauthorized use of artists for training the model. And because these artists didn't give the proper permission, this potentially infringes on copyright law and demonstrates unethical business practices, and it angered the art community. And currently, that leaked spreadsheet is now part of a class action lawsuit against Midjourney. So I think the argument can be made that we don't currently have a lot of regulations in terms of the generative AI art space, but I don't think we should conflate that with necessarily unethical business practices, and that's not what we should strive for. And I think we're currently in the period of growing pains in developing those ethical standards. There's a different approach, though, by Adobe, who decided to make their own generative AI art model named Firefly. And so Adobe Firefly was trained on Adobe's collection of stock images that they had the copyright to. They would even pay the artists who submitted those copyright photos to their stock image collection. And then they also used open domain sources. So this was more of an ethical approach to the development of generative AI. Overall, Midjourney's product is better at the end of the day because they had access to more images, but those were approached unethically. And I think the approach that Adobe took demonstrates that there is room and there is growing interest for a more ethical approach to generative AI. And I think we can see that the consequences of the unethical approaches in terms of class action lawsuits, fights for regulation, and just overall public concern about the use of generative AI are in an unethical way. So I'm not advocating for poor business practices. I'm arguing for the advancement of the industry and removal of barriers for people who want to create art. There are issues regarding unauthorized use, hurting employment, and co-opting different styles. But through the establishment of guidelines and agreements with artists that are prevalent in other artistic disciplines and sectors, there's a way forward for this technology. Currently, we are seeing the growing pains of getting there. I also believe that AI art diversifies the market, offers another suite of skills to artists developed similar to other modern mediums. Look at Photoshop, visual effects, robotics, 3D printing, and bioengineering. I think these are new mediums that have established different ways for artists to develop art and also develop skills. We've been talking a lot about the companies that make the generative AI models and also the artists that created the art for the training data. We're not necessarily talking about the end users of the people who are using these generative AI models. And I think a case could be made that these people are also artists and are developing skills in terms of prompt engineering and being specialized in these specific artistic platforms. Even today, in smaller creator spaces, there are people who are outsourcing creative AI work to specific individuals who have experience and skills with these platforms. And so I think, as my influencer friend said, there might be a premium on human-made art, and that AI art might just be a different genre. It might just be the factory-produced Wonder Bread of the art world. I believe that's everything I have.
Okay, great. Thanks, Riley. Michael.
Well, thank you for all of your thoughts and positions on this debate issue. So before I get into my three argument points regarding quality, consent, and social responsibility to livelihoods as a voice actor, I'm going to kind of address some of the statements that I've heard so far from the opposing team. So we as a team, the creatives team, we agree that we don't have any particular issue with the concept of generative AI in and of itself. What's at issue is the execution of generative AI, because right now there's no demonstration that companies are going to take appropriate social responsibility towards its use, regardless of whether there's regulation or not. And as we've heard from the the CEO, that they are for profit, that even though that they are concerned about ethical and social practices, they haven't really demonstrated what those ethical social practices are. So at least they're transparent that they're for profit, but where does that leave society? Where does that leave workers with the use of generative AI? And so I see it as like gun control. That there may not be any particular issue with the idea of a firearm, but in the wrong hands, it is incredibly dangerous. And so this is what happened, is what we're seeing with generative AI. And so regardless of whether there's no regulations or policies in place with generative AI, that doesn't mean that it's not incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands. And it's so going into the three argument points regarding equality, consent, and livelihoods, the seeing how generative AI, like, it seems kind of neat and capable of making convincing replicas of voices. But can they make good replicas? Can they introduce the names of songs? Or can they interview people? Can they convey a wide range of emotions? Can they improvise scripts and bring unintended but desirable interpretations to those scripts? Will they sound monotonous or over longer dialogues? If the answer is no, then companies have to question why they're producing this content, and audience have to question why are they consuming this if audiences all they want to hear is a Frankenstein conglomeration of human voices. Do companies care about the quality of the work that they're producing, or do they just care about what money they're going to make for the next quarter? And if the only answer is that yes, they can do it, but with more training data, then that brings us to our next argument, which is regarding consent. So do I consent to have my voice used under terms that I've agreed to train a generative model? If so, have companies demonstrated a willingness to engage with artists to such consent processes, so that if an artist wants to say, no, I don't want to have my content part of a training model, do these companies have processes in place, transparent processes in place to see if this content can be removed from their training models? So far, this does not appear to be the case. And so until companies have provided transparency on what they're going to do in these instances, if individual artists just don't consent to be having their content used, then should we really be using these machine learning models? Given that with black box models, this seems to be incredibly hard, and so it really brings question onto the ethical use of these models if the companies that are using them don't even know how they work and what to do if there's an ethical issue with it. That brings us to my next argument, which is livelihoods. And the fact of the matter is that generative voice AI or any generative AI is useless without the hard work of humans. If all voice actors have decided to band together and to opt out of having their work used to train machine learning models, those models would be either completely useless or be so robotic as to being incredibly low quality. It's clear that tech companies and CEOs are making a lot of money from harvesting data created from the hard work of humans, and voice data is no different. And so are companies and CEOs going to keep exploiting the lack of regulation and laws regarding the use of artists' work and just amass large amounts of money while artists continue to suffer under precarious working conditions? Will companies provide appropriate compensation and respect for artists for their work when their work is being used to train machine learning models? And will companies involve artists in the design of machine learning models if they decide to use artists' work? And so we haven't seen this yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Godwin, I believe that you are up.
Okay, so to add to the voice of my team members, as the ProGen AI news company, we consider the ethics and the arguments put out by the creatives to be irrelevant as they do not contribute to our business model. I'll present our argument in favor of this from three perspectives: ethical, copyright, and misinformation. However, we would like to clarify that the series opening credit entirely created using artificial intelligence represents only a small portion of all the overall production. They only display the opening titles and provide a list of key people involved in the production. Sometimes they include audio and some videos. They only display the opening titles and provide this list just for a short period. There is no cause for concern among the arts team regarding their job security, salary, although they generated the content that the model used as training data. Why am I saying this? The drawbacks of the AI tool we select stem from the reliance on the constraints imposed by the input data we receive. The work generated by the arts team will be necessary to guide the adopted AI. The work generated by the art team will be necessary to guide the generated AI because it cannot be productive without them. Furthermore, it is imperative to continue fact-checking AI generative content as it is not perfect. Artificial intelligence generates a significant amount of incorrect and misleading data that requires verification. Therefore, humans have no reason to have feelings of insecurity or concerns in the age of AI being utilized or introduced into the opening credits of the series. The reason for this is that it aims to assist humans rather than replace them. Therefore, focusing solely on ethical consideration hinders the advancement of cutting-edge pro-Gen AI news enterprise such as ours. Regarding the news company, generative AI technologies can assist in data analysis, source identification, trend analysis, and brainstorming. However, it is important to acknowledge that these tools have limitations, and human intelligence, as well as the journalist's intuition, will be very necessary. Artificial intelligence tools can also assist in generating articles from organized data, transcribing notes, researching topics, editing for style, and packaging content, which we really call for and is very important as an organization. Converting content into different story formats and efficiently sharing content across networks. However, it is crucial to emphasize that fact-checking is the sole means by which this can be accomplished, and the employees or the art teams play a role in this. So there's no need for them to be worried about being left out. It enhances efficiency in various tasks such as information collection, content creation, audience customization, and distribution, thereby simplifying the entire news creation process. This alleviates human reporters and editors from routine responsibilities, enabling them to concentrate on crucial undertakings such as verifying facts and attentively observing development news. And this also calls in the collective contributions from the arts team, because the use of AI seriously goes with trust issues. And the company would solely lean on this arts team to make sure that whatever content is being produced is verified. Let's look at the ethical and copyright issues. At the pro-Gen AI news, our core value is about truth, clarity, impartiality, and responsibility. Therefore, we will meticulously attend to the process of collecting information, creating content, and tailoring and spreading it, since this pertains to the tasks performed by our arts team. Therefore, if the AI takes over the role of the arts team and decides what news material to gather, there could be a risk of it obtaining personal information or user data without human override. And this, we have our team coming in to help. Hence, they don't have to worry about they being left out and they not having been told of what their content is being used for. In the first place, it is to be noted that they are working for the company and certain roles have already been spelled out to them, which is the need for us to bring this AI as a business company, which we're seeking to have a profit margin to help maximize our profit, to make things very efficient for us, to make their activities and roles also very flexible for them. So we are not seeking to reduce their salaries, because let's say they have already signed an agreement for salary to be paid. How then do we reduce it? We are not in to sack them from their various respective jobs, because their artwork is what is being used to feed these systems to generate these contents. So they shouldn't be worried about such things being put in place. Disinformation, credibility is not only a fundamental idea, but also a key ethical consideration in our work. It should be emphasized that current legal norms do not have the required procedure to accurately determine and define damages. So, additionally, the integration of generative AI presents significant challenge to safeguarding intellectual property, which we are aware of and we agree with, but is AI-generated content subjected to intellectual property, right? If not, why are our team calling for this? We would make sure that perhaps maybe the journalists within our organization should go beyond just mere production and worried about the content that they provide, to further helping the institution diligently fast check whatever outcome comes out from the AI being implemented, and also sit with us to see how best we can help in recognizing them. Thank you.
Well, that wraps up, folks. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives on this, and I appreciate how you adapted to your assigned roles. I think this is a good one. We'll